we've had now 7 votes. In this latest round of votes, what was the tallies?
It's the exact same from the 6th speaker vote as the 7th speaker vote. The only difference was that Matt Gaetz voted for Trump instead of Byron Donalds.
We have that.
Yeah, let's play that clip. I mean, come on.
Do you think he did that with Trump's knowledge, or just like as a sort of a love letter to Trump?
Brandon, what's your theory about that? I have a theory. Go ahead.
For those, I have the results from the 7th round of voting up in front of me. So Hakeem Jeffries 212, Kevin McCarthy 201, Byron Donalds 19, Donald Trump 1, and then President 1. So why is he putting his backing behind Trump?
Well, why is he voting for Trump? I think it's a way of winning the air war, essentially. It is Matt Gaetz's attempt to, carry Trump's banner. Well, weren't you making that example, like Bacon's Rebellion? Was it?
Yeah. Francis Bacon and Bacon's Rebellion was like, he revolted against the governor Berkeley in Virginia, saying like, actually, I want to carry out the king's orders, and the person that the king put as the governor isn't doing it correctly, so that's why I'm rebelling.
They were both supposedly carrying the banner.
It wasn't an anti-monarchical. It was
right.
Like who can be the best.
And I think that's what Gaetz is doing here. Is he's trying to say like, I'm being Trumpy by not voting for you, as opposed to, let's say, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Trump, who says to vote for McCarthy.
When you're a grifter amongst other grifters, you have to set yourself apart. And I think that you can either become like one of 20, or you could become one of one, and then everyone is forced to discuss why Matt Gaetz is the person who is, signaling that he's even more in favor of Trump than maybe Trump himself.
Maybe, yeah, he likes Trump more. All right, let's play this clip from, this is number 4. Oh, wait, this is the Gaetz one? This is where, Matt Gaetz. Yeah. Okay, let's watch this.
Gaetz.
Donald John
Trump.
Look at Margaret.
A chuckle roars through the crowd.
There you go.
What?
So she looked happy with that.
I can't wait to watch the vote tally in May, like the May 5th vote. That's going to be a fun one.
Operation Move On from Trump hasn't been working so well, has it?
No, I don't think so. They
just can't quit him.
Brandon, where do you think this ends? Honestly, where do you think this ends?
I mean, it feels at this point as though the people, dissenting from the Republican Party are doing so kind of aimlessly. It gives me off like the sort of vibe of like early Tea Party grievances with the Republican Party during 2010s, just like insisting there is some big divide between themselves and, the leadership of the party, only to eventually be folded back in due to some more concessions, here and there by the leadership. So I think, already that, Kevin McCarthy has given up some stuff, and he'll probably continue to give up things until, at least a few more of them peel off back towards the Republican Party, maybe do some more backroom deals. But I don't think it ends with, Byron Donalds becoming the Speaker of the House. Yeah. But maybe due to some fourth dimensional chess, it can end with Donald Johnson or John Trump becoming the Speaker of the House.
I increasingly, I'm starting to think it's going to be like a Steve Scalise. I mean, increasingly, I'm starting to think that at one point, they're going to go to McCarthy and say, dude, you're not getting it. It's not happening. We need to put up somebody else. The problem is, I don't have a sense, and I haven't seen really any reporting, which I think is also where's that Robert Costa guy? Why hasn't he written the story of X number of people would be okay with Steve Scalise, or X number of people wouldn't? Because you got to look to someone in leadership, right? Presumably. Although, I think Steve Scalise is not exactly putting their best foot forward. You don't want David Duke without the baggage, and I don't even know what that means. That's like saying, I'm baggage without the baggage.
It means he
But you
has
don't want
literally
that-
left the Klan hood at home. He leaves.
Well, it's just sort of like what is David Duke except for KKK? Like, how are you David Duke without the KKK? You're just, that's like saying, like, I'm Joe Stevenson, the guy who worked at the Piggly Wiggly. You know, that's who I am after I'm David Duke without the baggage. And I think that's going to be a problem for their frontline members. I mean, I don't know why it hasn't been exploited more now, you know, up to this point, but it's one thing to go out there and say, do you know who the Republicans elected to be their whip? People are just like, I don't even know what that means. But you can say, like, their leader, Steve Scalise, KKK without the baggage.
Yep.
I don't know, but I do think it's going to be, I think it's going to be somebody else. I just don't know who that somebody else is going to be. And I think it's going to come from the establishment wing of the party. I think. But it's weird. I don't know. Maybe like these, you know, like you hear Boebert, you know, list off a list of names, and none of them have gotten a single vote. And they went with Donald's after, you know, Jim Jordan. And it really does feel like these 20 are not even talking amongst themselves as to what the end game is here. That's the thing I find just absolutely sort of baffling. They don't, they're just nihilists. You know, I don't know why they would care about blowing up the House, because they want to do it either this way or by, you know, I don't know, voting against the debt ceiling or something like that. This is just, you know, by same impact, just a different methodology. But here is Scott Perry, Republican from Pennsylvania, arguing that Representative Byron Donalds, who I would find it hard to believe that Representative Scott Perry was even aware was a Republican 2 weeks ago. But apparently Scott Perry has been wanting to elevate this second sophomore congressperson to the speakership for quite some time. And this is a perfect opportunity to show how diverse the Republican Party is.
Now, as my colleagues probably know, the first black members of Congress to serve in this body were Republicans. As a matter of fact, you probably also know that Frederick Douglass, who went and worked with Abraham Lincoln to emancipate the people of color in this country, said he would never be anything but a Republican,
He could not be reached for comment.
You know, also, they were very much in favor of public schools, too, the Republicans at that time.
Some even thought we should occupy the South with the federal government.
That's correct.
Force
I wonder, are
integration.
we still doing that?
Look, new and complex ways of saying Lincoln was a Republican and he freed the slaves.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I like how Frederick Douglass, you may know Frederick Douglass. He's the guy who worked with Lincoln.
Sound familiar?
Any Frederick Douglass fans in the crowd? Any people in here like Frederick Douglass?
He's getting
anyone?
really big these days.
He worked with Lincoln like it was early Microsoft, and they had a great idea together.
Exactly.
I feel like, they must be trying to remove Frederick Douglass from like history books in some of the states that Republicans work in. So one day you won't be able to you won't be able to say, remember Frederick Douglass, he was a black guy who wanted to be a Republican. That's how you shoot yourself in the foot.
Right. I mean, in fact, in multiple states, we have outlawed the studying of Frederick Douglass. That's how much we embrace him.
Why did that Republican just do CRT on us?
Exactly.
Hey, stop that.
CRTer. That's pretty amazing. Let's read some IMs here. Vermont Ben, how much nonsense does this nonsense with the speakership mirror the Paul Ryan speakership? I recall he didn't want it either after Tea Party goons jettisoned Bonaire. I mean, it's a similar situation, but there is no sort of like Paul Ryan figure out there in this party where, Paul Ryan was so they lavished so much praise on him, the press, because he was like supposedly a wonk, and he was this new generation of Republicans. Vermont Ben says, I don't know, Sam, we probably want a house in case something bad crap crazy happens in Ukraine that requires an immediate response. I guess.
And the interesting thing too with that is that have you guys seen that book cover, which was like, the new faces of the Republican Party or something, and it's like Paul Ryan, Eric Cantor,
the Young Guns.
Yeah, the Young Guns.
The
right.
Young Guns
Paul,
was the story that
right.
they called them.
Paul Ryan, Eric Cantor, and Kevin McCarthy. It's like two of them have been totally jettisoned, like.
No, absolutely. Blast from the past. I forget about Paul Ryan all the time, but it's always good to hear about him. But I mean, I think that's and it always has been the central disagreement in Republican Party politics, at least for the past decade. It's not about any sort of real ideological dispute, but like whether or not the establishment powers are controlled by X special interest group enough. I think a lot of this you see in crypto too, when they criticize the financial, traditional finance. It's less about like the issues that are present in traditional finance and more about their exclusion from the seats of power in traditional finance. And so one of the reasons why people were supportive of Paul Ryan, even across the aisle, because it was this idea that maybe Gen X is finally going to be allowed to take power from the older people who control our government. And now the central problem with, that the Bobberts have with the House is that, the QAnon wing of the party is not sufficiently represented or embraced by the establishment, Republicans. And so that's what I think we see being mirrored a lot in our political system from, right wing and right wing adjacent groups. This idea that everything is fine except for the fact that we have not been allowed to fully take over.
Yeah, and I would add that within the Republican Party, the reason why we see this these type of things flourish is because the money has become so diffused. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, maybe even less than 10 years ago, where the Koch brothers had basically created an entire apparatus that was essentially like more powerful in terms of resources than the RNC. And we have since seen like so many billionaires come into this arena that there's just so much more money for a billionaire's pet Republican, essentially, than and that has like exacerbated this dynamic, I think, is really the best way to say it, where it would otherwise have died out. These but the Tea Party, for instance, was just completely funded through the Koch brothers, through Americans for Prosperity and whatnot. I mean, it was, all the buses it paid for all these protests and stuff like this. It funded all of these organizations, and a lot of that money has now just ended up into like, alt Republicans, if you will. No alt in terms of policy, just alt in terms of power source. Kevin McCarthy on the IM. Ooh, I've just offered the Freedom Caucus another concession. I will undergo surgery to have a MAGA hat embedded permanently onto my head. Between the 101 and the 5. Letter hack new drawing assignment. Sam leading the villagers through the forbidden zone to labor freedom. I also think at the turn of the century, economics and Darwinism were merged together along with racism and anti-Semitism as a naturally selected survival of the fittest type phenom that is just the way nature works. And the class of experts, both economically and other liberal institutions, just became the new ideological holders of surplus, replacing the religious institutions of feudal or ancient class models with a magical concept of economic theory that is too hard and mysterious to understand by the labor force.